This episode of Ghostly Swoosh may contain topics that some may find triggering. Additionally, there will sometimes be loud noises throughout the episode that may trigger people with misophonia. These timestamps will all be listed in the show notes.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious
Good evening,
things to eat.
moviegoers.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a
Tickets,
treat.
please.
Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights has told us many iconic tales of terror over the years. Who could forget the Chronicles of Terra Curentis, or Boris Schuster's legendary Bloody Mary investigation? These stories have both fascinated and terrified all generations of Horror Nights fans, from those who've been attending since the beginning, to fans that have just started learning about all the event's lore. As beloved as these tales are, there's one Halloween Horror Nights story that I feel is rather underappreciated. It's a tale that sheds more light, perhaps a flashlight's light, on one of Halloween Horror Nights' most infamous and beloved icons, and the theater he calls home. This is a story about a place where silver screen nightmares come to life, a majestic place tarnished by its dark legacy. And this is also a story about the vengeful guardian that protects this place with all his dead heart, for he is dedicated to ushering you into an experience you will never, ever forget. That is, if you even make it out alive. Submitted for the approval of hhnathome, I call this story The Tale of the Silver Screen. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to promote hhnathome and what it supports. I love how strong the Halloween Horror Nights fandom is. This is such a tight-knit community, and it's incredible how we can find love, unity, and acceptance even in the fog. And that's exactly why hhnathome was created by Horror Night Nightmares, not just to bring together the HHN fan community, but to also support a cause that needs our help now more than ever. That's why I implore anyone listening to this episode to donate to the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is dedicated to supporting LGBTQ youth by offering crisis intervention and suicide prevention services. Every donation helps fund training for counselors, expanding programs, and ensuring that all of what the Trevor Project has to offer stays accessible for those in need. Additionally, the Trevor Project works with policymakers to fight back against anti-LGBTQ laws and pass laws supporting LGBTQ youth. Your donation can help save lives. Donations made this year will help the Trevor Project reach their goal of assisting 100,000 LGBTQ youth with free crisis counseling. So please, if you can, please consider donating to the Trevor Project this Pride Month. Together, we can help guide LGBTQ youth toward a brighter future. During hhnathome, you can donate to the Trevor Project at give.thetrevorproject.org/hnnightmares. Again, that link is give.thetrevorproject.org/hnnightmares. I'll include this link in today's show notes, as well as in the description if you're listening to this episode on YouTube. And now, our feature presentation. On June 25th, 2009, Universal Orlando announced 3 of the major horror properties to be featured at Halloween Horror Nights that year. The 2010 Wolfman film, Chucky, and the wildly popular Saw franchise would each receive their own houses in addition to integration into the year's theme, ripped from the silver screen. Visitors to the Halloween Horror Nights website were greeted by a lonesome theater front. Posters for Chucky, Saw, and the Wolfman were prominently featured along with an ominous ticket booth. This tease had fans speculating about all the possibilities ripped from the silver screen could bring. How will the storyline unfold? Who's going to be the icon if there is one? Some theorized that a movie theater setting alluded to the director's return. Others even guessed that the projectionist character from the Sweet 16 Director's Cut Lagoon show might be the year's icon. Of course, we know neither of those happened. 12-year-old me seriously thought that the director was going to come back. I was fooled by some Photoshop thing somebody posted on the vault. Don't judge. I was 12. I legit thought it was real. Instead, over the next several weeks, The Ripped from the Silver Screen website wove a tale about a haunted movie palace and its unsavory legacy. If it weren't for the hard work of the researchers at Universal Archives and Collections, we wouldn't have known anything about the notorious Universal Palace Theater. The Universal Palace Theater had long been a subject of interest for the researchers. After the researchers unearthed materials about the Universal Palace in the Archives and Collections library, they were inspired to resume recreating the theater in miniature. The researchers' findings disentombed a horrifying tale that utterly defied explanation. Everything from gruesome murders, tragic accidents, and bizarre transformations happened at the Universal Palace. And these are all the stories I'm going to tell you today. So first, let's talk about the Universal Palace's humble beginnings. At the turn of the century, the rise of motion pictures heralded a remarkable evolution for the theater industry. First, vaudeville theaters, where magicians, singers, and all sorts of entertainers delighted audiences, included motion pictures as a part of their entertainment lineup. Audiences didn't attend vaudeville shows specifically to see films, but rather to revel in the newfangled spectacle of moving pictures. Then, Nickelodeons popped up all across the country. Nickelodeons were small theaters where you paid a nickel to watch movies in converted storefronts. Nickelodeons became very popular, especially amongst the working class. However, Nickelodeon theaters were plagued by all sorts of safety issues, such as poor ventilation, to fires caused by highly flammable nitrate film. Plus, as films got longer and starred prominent celebrities such as Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, the upper class desired going to the movies too. They didn't want to associate with the lower societal classes and the Nickelodeon theater's unsafe environments, though. So, movie palaces were created. Movie palaces sought to make the average citizen feel like royalty. They did this not just by providing comfortable seating and air conditioning, but also creating a visual, fantastical atmosphere for moviegoers. Some movie palaces took architectural cues from European and Asian cultures to further assist moviegoers with escaping from mundane reality. And when you visited a movie palace, you didn't just go there to see a movie. You paid admission for an entire night's worth of entertainment. Organists and singers would perform before the movie began. The Universal Palace Theater was one of these extravagant movie palaces. Back in the 1920s, movie studios produced and distributed films in their own movie houses, so of course, Universal Studios followed. Some sources claim the theater first opened as an opera house at the turn of the century and was later converted into the Universal Palace.
The palace, like many movie houses, began as so many renovated music halls and opera houses built at the turn of the century.
But according to other sources, the palace was one of 317 movie houses built in the 1920s by the then head of Universal Studios, Carl Laemmle Jr.
The current project resumed exhaustive research into the actual Palace Theatre, one of 317 movie houses built in the 1920s by Universal's Carl Laemmle Jr.
The website mentions the Universal Palace's Opera House past, so we're going to stick with that. The Universal Palace, like most locales in Halloween Horror Nights lore, was located in Cary, Ohio. Yes, I know, the legendary Truth merchandise at last year's tribute store said that the theater was in Hollywood, California, but that was an error made by the merchandise designers. It's in Cary. Trust me, it'll all make sense later. The Universal Palace Theater opened its doors in October 1922. Around this time, a man named Julian Browning became an usher at the theater. Not much is known about Julian's past, but we do know that he loved movies. Perhaps when he was younger, he enjoyed visiting the Nickelodeon theaters and marveling at cinema's evolution. What Julian especially loved was the theater ambiance, the glowing screen, the whirring projector, the smell of buttery popcorn. This all inspired Julian to become an usher. Being an usher not only gave Julian the opportunity to protect the films he cherished, but it also allowed him to guard the sanctuary that showed them. Julian was very protective of the Universal Palace right from the start. He closely monitored patrons' behavior and got rid of unruly moviegoers in a swift, though not yet fatal manner. He started out by taking tickets and showing patrons to their seats, but as the years went by, he'd also fix the projectors and patch the movie screens. Julian garnered a reputation amongst moviegoers and fellow employees for taking his job a bit too seriously, but Julian didn't care. He defended his actions with his veneration of the Universal Palace and the films presented at the theater. The Universal Palace enjoyed moderate success throughout the 1920s and 30s. All of Hollywood's greatest movies have graced her screens, everything from the black and white horror classics to the romantic technicolor epics. However, in the late 1930s, the effects of World War II took its toll on movie palaces across the country, including the Universal Palace. Universal forced the palace into liquidation, and it passed into private ownership along with all the other Universal-owned theaters.
The Palace to be sold. The Universal Palace Theater will be sold as a part of the company's nationwide liquidation of assets. Burdened by increasing maintenance costs, general economic conditions, and decreasing attendance due to poor box office performance, the Universal Palace Theater is to be among the 317 theaters being sold according to Carl Lumley Jr. The son of the famous Universal founder, Carl Lumley, Carl Jr. has not enjoyed...
This would only be the beginning of the Universal Palace's transformation from beloved movie palace to a sanctum of evil. In 1940, a re-release of Lon Chaney Sr.'s The Phantom of the Opera was shown at the Universal Palace. While tending to his usher duties, Julian spotted a rowdy moviegoer in the audience. Fueled with anger that his favorite film was being so heavily disrespected, Julian argued with the moviegoer. During their scuffle, the moviegoer snatched Julian's flashlight out of his hand and threw it at the movie screen, tearing it in the process. Furious, Julian hurried backstage. His flashlight was sort of a comfort item to him. It not only represented his extensive knowledge of movie history, but also respect for the theater-going experience. Somehow, while trying to find his flashlight, Julian's neck got snagged in a sandbag dropline rope left over from the palace's opera house days. Julian slowly struggled as he twisted in the air, where he ultimately ushered himself to his tragic fate, death by strangulation.
Tragedy at Universal Palace Theater. Local movie theater usher found hanged. Longtime movie theater usher Julian Browning was found dead behind the big silver screen of the old Universal Palace Theater. Entangled in the drop line of an old abandoned stage counterweight system, the man's corpse was discovered slowly twisting in the frayed ropes, his neck broken, bruised, and stretched. Theatergoers will remember Browning as the unusually strict and stern rule-keeper who patrolled the aisles of the movie house with his flashlight at the ready. Police have not yet determined if the tragic death was self-inflicted or foul play. Many who remember
This tragic event, later dubbed the Strangled Case, was the night it all began. Sometime after Julian's death, an uptick of gruesome accidents and tragedies began occurring at the Universal Palace. Witnesses claimed that Julian had been present at each and every one of these incidents, lurking in the palace's aisles, balconies, and catwalks. Julian had somehow been raised from the dead to keep order and peace in his beloved theater. But this time, his ways of teaching moviegoers lessons in theater etiquette became much more lethal, for in death, he sought revenge on those who disrespected his Universal Palace so cruelly. The Ripped from the Silver Screen event website highlighted 8 of the incidents that befell the Universal Palace's reputation. These cases not only tied into the houses featured at 2009's event, but they also helped Universal Archives and Collections researchers piece together the Universal Palace's history for their model. Each case included evidence found by the researchers such as newspaper snippets, witness testimony, and physical items found at the various crime scenes. We've already talked about the Strangled case, which tied into the Silver Scream's house and the Usher's backstory, so let's get into the other 7. Savaged. A person's worst nightmare. 2 young twin girls visited the Universal Palace for the first time. Our daddy told us the movies can be very scary, the 2 girls said, and he was right. At a showing of The Wolfman, the girls witnessed a quote-unquote big hairy beast with sharp claws and long fangs going on a wild rampage after a laughing man threw popcorn at the screen. It's presumed that this disrespectful moviegoer, noted as being unfazed by horror movies, later became the Wolfman's next victim. Evidence included a bloody popcorn box and claw marks slashed through the silver screen. The presence of the Wolfman tied this case into, appropriately enough, the Wolfman house. Severed. Finger food turns out to be the real thing. Sometime in the 50s, Meats began selling their locally produced hot dogs and hamburgers at the Universal Palace's snack bar. At the release of a new independent horror film, a family of 4 purchased the snack bar's new movie meal combo. One family member, the youngest daughter, screamed when she found a severed finger in her hot dog. The family was later plagued with a bizarre side effect: the inability to consume anything aside from meat. Evidence included a flyer advertising the new movie meal combo and a radio ad advertising the Universal Palace's new concession offerings.
A hot dog? There you are, tender, juicy, done to a turn with some fixins'. Hamburgers, man? Just the way you like 'em, meaty, moist, and broiled to perfection. Soft drinks, kiddies? Take your choice, cold, tingly with flavor, all your favorite soft drinks for your selection. Something to eat for everyone, soft drinks to make your evening complete. Delicious, fresh, and satisfying to help your entertainment reach the peak of family fun.
Meats sausage samples were also given to state inspectors. When the inspectors requested more details about the sausages, the manufacturer, presumably a certain Samuel Meats, said, "Our secret recipe is the secret of our success." Meats' connection with this case tied it into the Leave It to Cleaver house. Bloodless. Left at the altar. A man was left deserted at the wedding altar when his bride-to-be was reported missing. Police intentionally slowed their response, believing that the bride had last-minute wedding jitters. The bride was later found at the Universal Palace lifeless and still dressed in her wedding gown. She had lost a fatal amount of blood, but no blood was found anywhere at the crime scene. Authorities later ruled the bride's cause of death as unknown. Earlier that day, the bride had attended a showing of a Dracula remake that claimed to be setting a new standard in the horror genre. Patrons spotted the bride, reportedly a fan of the film, reciting the film's dialogue word for word in the balcony. One patron mentioned overhearing the bride saying something about the calling.
Yeah, that's what I recall. She would come to the movie every night and sit up in the balcony reciting the film's dialogue word for word. Then on the last night she shows up dressed up like they found her, like a bride-to-be. She mumbled something about the calling, bought a ticket, handed it to an usher, and walked up the stairs. Next thing we know, the cops are here and the paramedics carry her out in a body bag. Weird.
The bride left behind her bouquet of roses. Researchers noted that the roses seemed frozen in time, as they showed no signs of decomposition. This case, of course, tied into the Dracula Legacy and Blood House, which was set on the night of the aforementioned calling. Electrocuted. Double tragedy strikes theater. On an unusually stormy evening, powerful lightning blasts caused a power outage at the Universal Palace. Management called in the theater's maintenance man to fix a smoldering lighting fixture in the balcony level. The maintenance man, concerned that an electrical short may have spread inside the wall, checked the wiring inside the wall and opened an interior access panel. Later, an even more powerful lightning strike descended upon the Universal Palace. This time, sparks shot out from the wall, instantly killing a patron that frequented the balcony to stay dry from the rain and to sneak in liquor without being caught. The patron's autopsy report revealed the extreme damage done to the patron's body, namely bursting of cooked muscle tissue and complete destruction of ligament connective membrane. In addition to the patron's empty whiskey flask, his now useless organ donor card was found at the scene. This gory, electrifying case tied into the Frankenstein creation of the damned house. Missing. 3 local teens were never seen again. A recently released horror film frequently brought in a group of 3 rowdy teenagers that liked disrupting the film's showings. Management eventually banned the teens from the theater, but that didn't stop them from coming back. On the film's final night, which was also the same night as the teens' senior prom, patrons spotted the teens sneaking into the Universal Palace through an emergency exit door. This was the last time anyone saw them. Although authorities couldn't find a satisfactory conclusion to this missing case, they did find the teens' bloodied boutonnieres and scraps of their white tuxedos in the Universal Palace's sewers. A wrench belonging to the Wyandotte County Water and Sewer Department was also found at the scene. This case tied into the spawning house. It's safe to assume that the teens later became the meal of the scolder creatures featured in that house. Insane. Odd tribute or twisted hoax. After the showing of a specific film, someone began leaving behind mangled children's toys and dolls at the Universal Palace's Lost and Found. Several patrons suffered from hallucinations and nightmares after seeing the film connected with the odd toys, with one patron even undergoing psychiatric evaluation. The culprit, or perhaps culprits, behind the toy's appearance was never found, leaving this case even more shrouded in mystery than the others. Evidence included a game spinner with macabre directions such as wound head and chop arm or leg, a broken pull string, and a psych report that suggests the patron traumatized by the toys suffered from pediophobia, the fear of dolls. In the Chucky Friends Till the End house, Chucky took beloved children's toys and dolls and mutilated them beyond recognition. This case and its evidence perfectly tied into that house. Trapped. Awful stench ends mystery. Patrons complained after a local businessman kept talking on his cell phone during a showing at the palace. The man, agitated by both the patrons' complaints and the inability to find a signal, stormed off to the lobby, where he was last seen. A week later, a terrible smell drew attention to the balcony level and the rarely used roof access hallway. The roof access hallway was left over from the palace's opera house days and was designed to be soundproof so stagehands could access the catwalk without being heard. Authorities found the businessman in the palace's roof access hallway with his right leg twisted into the corroded ladder steps. Because of the hallway's soundproofing, the businessman's screams for help had been ignored, and he was still unable to find a signal at a higher elevation. The businessman's cell phone was found at the scene, which revealed his last text: "No damn signal here. We'll try again in a few minutes." Also found at the crime scene was a mysterious list of names. The names on the list were Brenda, Amanda, Michael, Malik, Britt, Patrick, Reinhardt, and Paul, all names of Jigsaw's past victims. When the businessman's wife was questioned by authorities, she didn't recognize any of the names on the list. The businessman found himself trapped just like all of Jigsaw's victims, tying this case into the Saw House. In addition to the cases featured on the website, 3 other documented tragedies were revealed in a documentary about the making of the Universal Palace model. The first involved the palace temporarily becoming a morgue after a flood.
The palace morgue! Unprecedented flooding left so many misidentified bodies that the local movie house was pressed into service as a temporary morgue. Rescue workers made a decision to store the nameless corpses in the theater's lobby and balcony until transportation to local hospitals could be arranged. The gruesome sight left many in the community speechless as they dealt with the loss of loved ones, neighbors, and friends.
The second newspaper snippet briefly discusses a film actress that disappeared after one of her movies premiered at the palace.
Actress disappears. AP Hollywood. Aspiring actress Evelyn Crane goes into reclusion following box office flop. She was last seen publicly at a special Universal Palace Theater screening of her classic film, The Dark Chapter. Ironically, its title foretold the subsequent phase in the actress's life.
Before I talk about the next newspaper snippet, here's some more information about the Evelyn Crane story. Around the same time Halloween Horror Nights 19 began, an ARG called Evelyn Offscreen appeared on the internet. Evelyn Offscreen was a project where participants played roles in an interactive story both in real life and on various social media such as Twitter. Although this ARG had no official ties with Universal Orlando or Halloween Horror Nights, the game's social media gave us information about who Evelyn Crane might have been. Evelyn's journal, hosted on Blogger, chronicled her life and interests. Evelyn was an actress signed to Silver Crypt Studios, distributor of films such as Murder at the Edge of Night and The Silver Bullet. Her career lasted from 1953 until 1972. She starred in over 75 films where she played characters such as damsels and seductresses. In a blog post titled Why I Left, Evelyn reveals she left Silver Crypt Studios after the press paid more attention to a younger, up-and-coming star named Helen Dean at the premiere of their latest film, The Dark Chapter. One critic even told Evelyn to her face that she'd been miscast and was too old to play her part in the film. Deeply insulted, Evelyn secluded herself from society afterwards and gravitated toward a fascination and later intention to find eternal beauty and youth. She cites Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian countess known for bathing in blood, as one of her inspirations, along with the hydrozoan Turritopsis nutricula, a jellyfish that cannot die. The Universal Palace is name-dropped a couple of times throughout Evelyn's journal, as well as in social media posts. On the Why I Left blog post, an anonymous commenter suggests via a broken link that the critic that insulted Evelyn might have been killed by Julian in retaliation. Outraged, Evelyn responded, "The Universal Palace Theater has a long history of unexplained tragedy. Surely you are not implying that I could be responsible for events that date back further than my film career? I was not even aware that this man had something terrible befall him until you so rudely intruded on my journal." On September 27, 2009, 2 days after the start of Halloween Horror Nights 19, Evelyn tweeted this: "The recent unpleasantness has drawn my attention to the Palace Theater. I do not yet understand what is happening, but it may prove useful. Then, in response to a now inactive Twitter account, Evelyn responded, "Eyes in the field are invaluable. Note your observations about what is happening in the theater, and report back to me." Finally, in response to another inactive Twitter account, Evelyn had this to say about the Usher: "Wrathful poltergeist, decaying zombie, or pure myth. Whatever has become of Browning, I have no interest in becoming that." It isn't publicly known how Evelyn's story ended. According to an archived version of the Evelyn Offscreen website, the actors involved with the game freely improvised an ending that was unanticipated by the game leads. Maybe Evelyn found her eternal youth. And finally, we have an incident where the Universal Palace got struck by lightning.
Lightning leaves theater in flames. The popular Universal Palace Theater was struck by lightning late last night. At press time, the resulting fire had not yet been contained, and it is not known if any casualties or fatalities occurred. According to many in the community, the movie house has had an unusual share of tragedies in its history. So many, in fact, that some wonder if there is a curse associated with the building, its owners, or employees.
Miraculously, despite everything, the Universal Palace Theater rose from the ashes and continued operating well into 2008. That is, until yet another incident occurred. On Halloween night, a group of 6 teenagers attended a double feature of The Strangers and The Phantom of the Opera at the Universal Palace. The teens made a ruckus all throughout The Strangers, so management intervened several times. During The Phantom of the Opera, though, things got deadly silent. The palace's manager couldn't find the teens anywhere. He assumed they'd left, so he began closing the theater for the evening. While cleaning, the manager noticed something pressing against the movie screen. He went behind the screen to see what was there, and came across something absolutely horrifying: the bodies of the 6 teens hanging by their necks from the palace's rafters. There were 6 bodies, but 7 ropes, and the 7th rope, which hung taut in the center of the rafters, belonged to none other than the Usher himself. Throughout the years, many victims learned a thing or two about movie theater etiquette through the most fatal means. Please be courteous and turn off all cell phones, or else you'll find your legs smashed in a stairwell. Please no outside food or drink, or else you'll be electrocuted by lightning. This incident, erroneously reported as a mass suicide, was the event that finally caused the Universal Palace to close its doors. Or so we thought. In September 2009, a reporter named Stephen Brody was invited to the Universal Palace for a quote-unquote special screening. Upon arriving at the theater, Brody found the palace closed for business, but he managed to enter the theater and explore the lobby. He even found a box of popcorn and a ticket waiting for him at the snack bar. Brody then entered one of the theater's auditoriums, where he found a very shocking surprise.
Hello? God, what is that? What is getting all around me? This isn't supposed to be real!
This recording was made specifically for 2009's media gift. Members of the press each received a box of bloody, real popcorn with hair inside, a notepad with notes and Polaroids about the Universal Palace's upcoming triple feature and the Usher, and an actual working tape recorder that included Brody's last words. So, if you spotted a random tape recorder in the Usher's snack bar scene and HHN icons captured and wondered what the hell it meant, there's the reference. I've explained it for you. Brody may have just been a character created for the media gift, but let's theorize more about who he could have been. He could have just been a simple reporter working with Universal Orlando, but maybe he was also working with John Michaels, the ghost tracker from 2008's opening ceremonies? Or maybe he had some connections with Legendary Truth? I think I'm grasping at straws here, but you know me, I like to theorize about things. Speaking of Legendary Truth, let's explain their initial lack of presence in the Universal Palace's story. Legendary Truth had no involvement whatsoever in 2009's event, much to fans' confusion. I even remember this being somewhat of a topic on the Vault back in the day. The closest mention to Legendary Truth was a photo on the website that mentioned an unnamed amateur urban exploration team exploring the theater at an unknown time. Legendary Truth, as we know, isn't exactly amateur, and Universal Archives and Collections doesn't fit this description either. This has all been seemingly retconned with last year's Legendary Truth merchandise sold at the Tribute store. Yep, coming back to that. The B-side of the vinyl record includes recordings from Legendary Truth's various investigations such as Hellgate Prison, Castle Vampire, and of course, the Universal Palace Theater. There's no new material on the record, though. The track on the record is just audio of the Universal Palace documentary, plus Julian's intro to the Universal Palace.
The true stories, in particular those involving theatre usher Julian Browning, the subsequent account...
Good evening, moviegoers.
Legendary Truth's involvement in the Universal Palace case has not yet been formally addressed in canon, but this might be a step closer to that. The Usher, despite not appearing on billboards and commercials, was prominently featured at the Ripped from the Silver Screen event. He made many memorable appearances on various Florida news and radio stations to help promote Halloween Horror Nights 19. The Usher's backstory may illustrate him as a cold yet tragic figure, but these news appearances showed his darkly humorous side.
How's the bear trap treating you? Just sob if you can hear me. Walker, you'll be running through this terror park. And should you be one of those people not in traffic, wave at the people waiting in traffic as you drive by. Rub it in. I prefer to hang out with Chucky because some of my confidence comes from my height. Of course, if you wouldn't mind lowering your seat just a little bit so I feel about you.
At the event proper, Universal Studios Florida's archway transformed into the Universal Palace entrance, complete with a marquee and ticket booth. The Usher, along with his minions, greeted guests at the entrance plaza, and video clips of the Usher introducing each of the houses played on a screen in the center of the arch. I hope one day these videos come out in much better quality. I would like that a lot. The Usher and the Universal Palace could be seen in the Silver Scream's house. Similar to the all-night die-in houses at 2003 and 2006's events, the rooms in Silver Screams were each based on different movies. These movies included Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera, My Bloody Valentine, The Thing, Army of Darkness, Shaun of the Dead, and The Strangers, which were all presented as films being shown at the Universal Palace. The house's most memorable scene showed the Usher's 6 victims hanging behind the movie screen as the Phantom of the Opera's infamous unmasking scene played. The Usher could also briefly be spotted in videos played in the Horrorwood Die-In Scare Zone. The Scare Zone actually showed somewhat of an Easter egg teasing the upcoming 20th anniversary. A video of an old-fashioned clown appeared, but then the Usher was cut into the footage, shushing you. And speaking of Horror Nights 20, the final week of Horror Nights 19 featured Shadows of the Past, a scare zone with some of the past icons and characters from the event, including the Usher. Guests attending the Unmasking the Horror tour that year could see Universal Archives and Collections' Palace model up close. And yes, I know, this was actually the work of art and design. I'm just telling the story as it was told on the website. Throughout the years, the model and its figurines were also displayed at various Orlando History Center exhibits, as well as the HHN 30 Tribute Store in 2021. Universal Archives and Collections restoration project may have succeeded, but this was not the end of the Usher's story. In 2010, a lantern kept in Universal Orlando's art and design department raised suspicion. A conversation between a member of Legendary Truth and a disgruntled Universal team member revealed that the lantern wasn't just a decorative prop, but something harboring true evil. The lantern opened a portal that ultimately allowed a Daru, the physical personification of fear, to be unleashed upon the world. We learned that aside from Bloody Mary, the 5 main icons had been serving as fear's heralds, or pawns, to help usher in you know, I've been waiting to say that. A new era of darkness. The Usher represented vengeance, appropriately for his violent ways of punishing rule breakers. According to Dr. Abraham Lockheed's book, Demons Among Us, Uncovering Evil, vengeance is depicted showing one individual bludgeoning another with an object. This object is always seen with light emanating from it. And let's talk about that, the Usher's flashlight. We know from the Strangled case that Julian viewed his flashlight as a symbol of movie history and following the palace's rules, but how exactly were all those monsters ripped from the silver screen? How did the Wolfman and Dracula and all the others escape their celluloid confines to enter our world? Did the Usher's flashlight have something to do with it? Does it have, some sort of magic power? And what about the Universal Palace itself? Is it sentient? What's going on there? I have my theories. At the event, the Usher and his fellow heralds could be seen in the fear-revealed scare zone. Each icon had their own miniature-themed set, and Julian's was, of course, the Universal Palace Theater. Also, depending on when you went through, the Usher could be spotted in the Horror Nights Hallowed Past house, along with some of the other icons in the Prop Warehouse finale. After Horror Nights 20, fear was banished back to the lantern along with its heralds. Although Julian appeared in 2015's Icons HHN Scare Zone, It wouldn't be until 2021 when we received some more information about how exactly the Usher and the other icons had been faring in Fear's Lantern. In 2021's HHN Icons Captured House, we learned that Fear isn't actually the Lord of the Lantern as we thought he was. He's actually the Lantern's gatekeeper, and the Lantern serves as a gateway to a hellish underworld that exists underneath Universal Studios Florida. Julian is amongst the now 7 heralds captured in Fear's Lantern. He lives in a section of the Lantern that's fashioned to look like the Universal Palace, complete with an auditorium and snack bar. Although not all of the heralds get along with each other. No, they're all friends, damn it, I refuse to believe this. They have joined forces to torment and gather souls. And sometimes Fear lets one of them sit on the throne. For funsies, I guess. And this is where the Usher's story currently ends. We'll have to wait until the next anniversary year to see what might happen. Will Julian and the others rebel against Adaru and escape from the Lantern? Or maybe we'll go back in time and visit the Universal Palace in its prime. As I like to say, we'll just have to wait and see. Before we wrap up, here's some facts you might not know about the Usher and the Universal Palace. According to a 2013 Orlando History Center exhibit, one of the inspirations behind the Universal Palace Theater was the real-life Universal Rivoli Theater in Indianapolis. The Rivoli opened in 1927, and its construction was overseen by Carl Laemmle Jr. himself. Similar to the Universal Palace, the Rivoli has ghost stories of its own. The Rivoli was built on a family burial plot for starters, and over the years, patrons and employees have spotted spirits and strange happenings all around the theater. Everything from apparitions, smoking cigarette butts, and even a toilet flushing on its own. The Usher's name, Julian Browning, was formed using 2 surnames of Universal horror directors, Rupert Julian, who directed The Phantom of the Opera, and Todd Browning, the director of Dracula. On Twitter, Mike Aiello, who was one of the creators of the Usher, wrote, "He's one icon that only killed if you disrespected the theater. His rules are ironclad." In 2012, we learned that each of the icons belonged to the Legions of Horror, undead factions summoned by the Iniquitous, the Patrons of Death. Each legion received its own family tree, and these trees revealed the various icons and characters that belong to each legion. Julian is the only icon that belongs to the Karazhan Legion. Also known as Walkers, the Karazhans, according to official lore, is more of a state of being rather than a segregated class. They are singular and focused, unconcerned about what others think, and inspirational to novelists, filmmakers, and playwrights. And that's the end of our episode. I really hope you enjoyed learning a new thing or two about the Usher and the Universal Palace. Most of you listening to this episode probably already know how passionate I am about the Usher. I mean, hell, I am the Usherette. But most importantly, I'm passionate about informing others of his entire backstory, especially things they might not know. That's why I chose to focus on the Usher for my HHN at Home episode. To quote Julian himself,
I hope you enjoyed our feature presentation.
Roll credits! Thanks for listening to the Ghostly Swoosh podcast. If you'd like to support me and my podcast, why don't you consider buying me a cup of coffee? Go to ko-fi.com/theusherette. You can also follow Ghostly Swoosh at its new Twitter account at GhostSwooshPod, and my socials at TheUsherette19 on Twitter and TheUsherette on Instagram and TikTok. That'll do it for today's episode. See you, everyone!